The hangar bay of Velmara Prime buzzed with the sound of incoming shuttles, heavy machinery, and the occasional chatter of cadets from different planets, all gathered at the most advanced interstellar academy in the galaxy. But today, the noise turned into silence. It started with a low metallic growl that echoed through the steel corridors. Then came the pounding, slow, heavy footsteps that made the ground shake. A group of insectoid recruits from Gelther 9 stopped mid-conversation. A towering reptilian guard froze near the entry gate, his hand inching toward his stun baton. All eyes turned toward the main entrance as the doors hissed open, and the reason for the sudden tension stepped in. It was Princess Kairina of the Xelari Empire, known across systems not just for her royal blood and tactical genius, but for the creature that followed her like a shadow. Droll's Hawk. No one dared speak the name too loud. It wasn't just a pet, it was a creature engineered for destruction, a living weapon bred in the forbidden labs of a dead world. 8 feet tall when standing, its skin a dark gray armor that shimmered under the artificial light, with claws longer than daggers and eyes that glowed like twin embers. Its presence sucked the warmth from the air. One cadet dropped his datapad. Another backed away until he bumped into a wall. A group of battle-hardened trainees from the war-born planet Vargon whispered stories about how Drozhak once tore through an entire battalion when angered. Kairina walked calmly beside the beast, her violet eyes scanning the hangar as if daring someone to question her right to be there. But no one did. They just watched, paralyzed by fear or fascination, unsure which was stronger. Until he showed up. Ethan Kessler, the only human in this cycle's cadet intake, strolled into the hangar late, holding a protein bar in one hand and a duffel in the other. His boots were dusty, his jacket half-zipped, and he looked like he hadn't read the memo about the monster standing 10 meters ahead. As he came closer, most expected him to stop, maybe retreat or at least look alarmed. But he didn't. He didn't even slow down. Instead, he tilted his head at Drozhak and said, "You're a big one, huh?" Every onlooker froze, expecting Drozhak to snarl, lunge, maybe tear the foolish human apart. But the creature didn't growl. It didn't even bare its teeth. It sniffed the air, lumbered forward with surprising grace, and sat down, right in front of Ethan. Its head lowered, eyes curious, not hostile. Ethan, without missing a beat, reached into his pocket and pulled out a strip of dried meat, the kind used for field rations. "Want a treat?" he asked casually, holding it up. Drozhak sniffed it, then carefully took it from Ethan's hand, chewing thoughtfully before letting out a strange, rumbling sound. It almost sounded like a purr. A collective gasp swept across the hangar. Kairina blinked, clearly not expecting that. Drozhak had never behaved that way, not even with her. Slowly, she walked toward Ethan, eyes narrowed with suspicion but not anger. "You're not afraid of him?" she asked. Her voice was smooth but laced with something unreadable. Ethan shrugged, still petting Drozhak between its armored shoulder blades. "Why would I be? He's just hungry. And lonely, maybe. I know the look." Kairina studied him, trying to decide if he was foolish or fearless. Most likely both. Drozhak leaned into Ethan's touch, making a noise that made half the hangar flinch. But it wasn't hostile, it was content. The silence stretched long until Kairina finally said, "He doesn't trust anyone. Not even my guards. He's attacked people for looking at him wrong." Ethan gave her a side glance. Maybe they looked at him like he was a weapon, not a being. Her expression softened a little, but she said nothing. Drozhak stood again, nudging Ethan gently toward the exit like a massive, armored dog. Ethan laughed, rubbing his shoulder where the creature had bumped him. All right, I'm going," he said, walking off without a care, Drozhak following him closely. Kairina hesitated, then turned and followed as well, her usual silence more thoughtful than cold. Behind them, the other cadets stared in disbelief. The monster that terrified everyone had just made a friend, and it had chosen a human. That night, Kairina sat in her private quarters, the lights dimmed, a holo screen open in front of her replaying the security footage from the hangar. She watched Ethan's movements again and again, his posture, his tone, the ease with which he had treated Drozhak like a companion. Not a threat. Not a trophy. She didn't understand it. Drozhak wasn't made to trust. He was born in a lab, bred from the DNA of predators so dangerous they were wiped out millennia ago. He had turned violent at the slightest provocation, never showed affection, barely tolerated Karina. But with Ethan, it had taken seconds. She paused, the footage on Ethan's smile. It was relaxed, without fear, without calculation. "Why weren't you afraid?" she whispered to herself. Across the station, in a dimly lit dorm room, Ethan lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. Drozhak was curled up at the foot of his bed, too large for the room but trying to fit anyway, breathing softly. Ethan reached out and scratched the creature's head. "You're not so bad," he muttered. Drozhak rumbled in response, eyes closed. Outside, through the window, the stars burned bright, and somewhere out there, in the dark between galaxies, something else had taken notice. Something that stirred when it felt fear and grew curious when it found none. The news spread across Velmara Prime like fire in dry grass. Drozhak, the fearsome genetically engineered beast feared by half the galaxy, had bonded with the human cadet, Ethan Kessler. Within hours, the Academy was buzzing with rumors, debates, and official concerns. The senior instructors, hardened veterans from the United Planetary Forces, held a closed-door tribunal to discuss whether the human should be reprimanded, studied, or removed. No one had ever seen Drozhak calm, let alone friendly. Security footage showed the impossible again and again. Drozhak lowering his head, accepting food, letting Ethan touch him like an old friend. The footage made them uneasy. Some called it a fluke. Others said the human was using pheromones or some hidden tech. Only one voice in the room challenged them: Princess Karina. With calm poise and steel in her voice, she stood before the tribunal and requested a chance to prove that what Ethan had with Drozhak wasn't luck or manipulation, but something real. She proposed a field exercise, a live mission test, pairing Ethan and Drozhak in a simulation designed to test control, response, and trust under pressure. The instructors hesitated, but finally agreed, though with warnings and layered contingencies. If the creature lost control, the mission would be terminated. If Ethan disobeyed orders, he'd be expelled. The next day, a transport shuttle dropped them on a mined-out asteroid, once used for rare crystals and now turned into a training ground. The mission was simple on paper: locate a lost beacon in the tunnels, retrieve it, and return. Ethan stood at the edge of the entry shaft, his helmet light flickering over ancient rock walls. Beside him, Drozhak shifted restlessly, his claws clicking against the metal floor. Karina monitored them from the command post, her voice steady in their comms. "Ethan, remember, don't separate from him. If he reacts to anything, fall back immediately." "Got it?" Ethan replied, patting Drozhak's side. "We'll be fine, right, big guy?" Drozhak grunted softly and moved forward into the darkness. At first, everything was quiet, except for the sound of their steps and the occasional drip of water from cracked pipes. But deeper in the tunnels, things changed. A faint signal echoed through Ethan's wristpad, a false beacon, too faint and too distant to match the real one. As he adjusted the scanner, the walls seemed to shift, like shadows moving just beyond the edge of his light. Suddenly, the comms crackled with static. Karina's voice broke up. "Ethan, multiple. Not part of Sim Get," then silence. Before he could respond, the lights above flickered and died. A cold wind swept through the corridor. Drozhak froze. Then, from deeper within, shapes emerged: pirates. Real ones. Scavengers who had discovered the simulation site and set a trap for whoever came. There were 6 of them, armed, fast, and well-coordinated. Ethan raised his hands, trying to talk them down, but they didn't want words. They wanted gear, hostages, maybe more. One lunged. The moment the pirate moved, Drozhak reacted like a storm. With a roar that shook dust from the ceiling, the creature charged, slamming the attacker into the wall hard enough to leave a dent. Another fired a plasma bolt, but Drozhak was faster, his claws slashing through armor like paper. It was a blur of movement, terrifying and beautiful, a beast built for war moving with terrifying precision. But in the chaos, Ethan noticed something strange. Drawshak wasn't trying to kill. He was pushing them back, creating space between Ethan and danger. Protecting, Ethan shouted over the noise. Stand down! We're not here for a fight. The last two pirates fled into the dark, disappearing like ghosts. Drawshak stood over them, growling, eyes glowing, but when Ethan touched his shoulder, he stopped. Just like that. The moment passed. The silence returned. Later, when the extraction shuttle arrived, the instructors were silent, watching the footage. Drawshak had taken control of the situation. Ethan had kept him calm. They had completed the mission and survived a real threat. It was undeniable. Now there was a bond between them that defied everything known about the creature. Back on the station, Karina found Ethan near the observation deck. She didn't speak right away. She just watched him as he sat beside Drawshak, feeding him pieces of rations like nothing had happened. Finally, she asked, "How did you stop him?" Ethan shrugged, not looking at her. "I didn't stop him. He just listened." She sat beside him, more curious than before. "He never listened to anyone. Not even me. You saw what he's capable of." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah. And I also saw what he chose not to do. He could have killed them. He didn't." Karina was quiet for a moment. Then she said something no one else had dared. "He trusts you more than he trusts me." Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at Drawshak, who now lay with his head resting near Ethan's boots, breathing calmly. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe he just knows I'm not here to control him. I don't treat him like a monster. I've been one myself once, or close enough. I know what it's like to be feared for something you didn't choose." Karina looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" Ethan didn't smile this time. "I grew up on a fringe colony. Got caught in a border war when I was 10. Lost my family. Ended up with a unit that used kids like bait to draw out rebels. One time, I calmed down a berserker warbeast just by talking to it. Everyone thought I had some ability. I didn't. I just knew how to look it in the eyes and say, 'I don't hate you.' That's all it takes sometimes." The princess didn't speak. Her gaze shifted to Drawshak, then back to Ethan. She had trained all her life to command respect, power, strategy, but this human had done something she never managed. Not with force, but with empathy. That night, in the safety of her chambers, she watched Drawshak sleep beside Ethan through a live feed. Her fingers hovered over the control pad, tempted to replay the moment he had shielded Ethan from a plasma bolt without hesitation. She didn't understand it yet, but something had changed. Not just in Drawshak, but in her. Somewhere out there in the cold, infinite dark, something had begun to watch with growing interest, drawn not to fear or strength, but to the quiet bond between a human and the beast that once terrified everyone. The days after the asteroid incident passed with tension humming quietly in the background like a silent alarm waiting to go off. Everyone at the academy now walked differently around Ethan and Drawshak, more careful, more curious, more distant. Some cadets tried to start conversations, offering praise or friendly jokes, but their eyes always darted toward the massive creature that followed Ethan like a silent protector, and their voices wavered when Drawshak's burning gaze met theirs. Others, especially the elite squads from royal planets, whispered theories about genetic links, mind control, or even that the human was part of some secret Earth-based experiment. None of it made sense to them because what Ethan had done wasn't scientific, it was human, and that made it even harder to explain. Meanwhile, Karina found herself thinking about Ethan more than she liked. She couldn't stop reviewing the reports, searching for signs, clues, patterns, something that might explain why Drawshak, the creature created by her own family's forgotten science, had chosen a complete outsider to trust more than its own master. She remembered how her father had once said that every weapon was built with a flaw, not in the metal or the programming, but in the intention behind it. She wondered now if Drawshak was ever meant to be just a weapon at all. With curiosity boiling beneath her royal composure, she summoned Ethan to her personal archive room, hidden beneath the main tower of Velmara Prime. The room was not listed on official maps, and most cadets didn't know it existed. Ethan arrived with Drawshak, who paused at the threshold before entering, the creature's eyes narrowing as if recognizing a place it had been before. The walls were lined with ancient data scrolls, crystal cores, and blinking memory blocks, each one a record of old Exalaria experiments, war strategies, and biological weapon designs. "Why bring me here?" Ethan asked, glancing at a set of dusty blueprints that showed large skeletal structures with numbers instead of names. Kaurina walked slowly to a terminal and activated a hidden file, showing footage of Drozhak when he was first released from containment years ago. The creature was feral, uncontrollable, ripping through reinforced barriers, even resisting stun rounds from planetary defense forces. "This was before I met him," she said. "He had no control, no reason, no soul. He tore apart anything that moved. My people wanted him destroyed, but I saw something different." He hesitated once before striking a child who wandered into the lab. Ethan watched silently as the footage shifted to a still image, a small boy barely taller than Drozhak's leg, standing frozen as the beast raised a claw. But instead of attacking, Drozhak turned and slammed into the wall beside him, roaring into the void. "He chose not to kill," Ethan said softly. Kaurina nodded. "But after that, he never trusted anyone again. Not even me. Until you." She turned to him fully now, her voice sharper. "What did you do to him, Ethan? What are you not telling me?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He knelt beside Drozhak, running his hand along a rough patch of old scar tissue on the creature's flank. The skin there was burned, cracked, old layers of pain etched deep into the body. "These scars aren't from battles," Ethan said quietly. "They're from tests. Someone hurt him, again and again, until he forgot what kindness looked like." Kaurina stiffened, her face unreadable. "You think I did this?" Ethan shook his head. "No. But someone close to you did. Someone who saw him as a project, not a life." Kaurina said nothing. Her hands clenched into fists. "This archive has restricted files," she admitted after a long pause. "My father ordered them sealed. Only I have access now. I've never opened them." Without waiting for permission, she placed her hand on the control panel and authorized access. A series of old documents flickered into view project names like Nightfang, Mindspike, and finally, DROZH AK-1. Ethan stood and leaned in, reading the logs with growing discomfort. The records told of behavioral overrides, pain response trials, and mental resets done again and again to test obedience. There were mentions of failure, of rebellion, and a final entry marked "Subject terminated, archive incomplete." But Drozhak had survived. He was never terminated. He had escaped, and someone had covered it up. Kaurina looked pale now, her eyes fixed on a photo of her father standing proudly beside a younger, smaller Drozhak, bound in energy chains. "He lied to me," she whispered. "He said Drozhak was an accident. He said it was abandoned research from our enemies. But he was the one behind it all." Ethan placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Maybe he was afraid. Maybe he thought he was doing what needed to be done to win a war. But he created something that couldn't be controlled and then tried to erase the truth. Drozhak let out a low sound, not a growl, but something deeper. It echoed through the chamber like an old memory waking up. The creature stepped forward, pushing its head gently against Kaurina's side, not in anger, but in understanding. Her eyes widened as she placed her hand on his massive brow. "You remember this place?" she said. Drozhak nodded slowly, eyes closing. It was the first time he'd acknowledged her touch without pulling away. A fragile thread of something new began to form between them. Trust, perhaps. Forgiveness, maybe. Ethan watched it happen and knew that something deeper was unfolding, not just a connection between species, but the uncovering of truths long buried under scars, both visible and hidden. But even as the moment passed quietly between the three of them, Ethan's mind raced with unease. Because hidden in the lower sections of the file was one more entry marked 2. A second subject. No records. No name. No location. Just a single status, active. Somewhere out there, another like Drozhak existed. Maybe worse. Maybe smarter. Maybe still loyal to its creators. Ethan said nothing for now. He didn't want to break the moment Karina and Drozhak were sharing. But deep in his gut, he felt the shift coming. This wasn't just about healing an old wound anymore. It was about stopping the next one from opening. Wandered into the lab. Ethan watched silently as the footage shifted to a still image, a small boy barely taller than Drozhak's leg, standing frozen as the beast raised a claw. But instead of attacking, Drozhak turned and slammed into the wall beside him, roaring into the void. He chose not to kill, Ethan said softly. Karina nodded. But after that, he never trusted anyone again. Not even me. Until you. She turned to him fully now, her voice sharper. What did you do to him, Ethan? What are you not telling me? Ethan didn't answer right away. He knelt beside Drozhak, running his hand along a rough patch of old scar tissue on the creature's flank. The skin there was burned, cracked, old layers of pain etched deep into the body. These scars aren't from battles, Ethan said quietly. They're from tests. Someone hurt him, again and again, until he forgot what kindness looked like. Karina stiffened, her face unreadable. You think I did this? Ethan shook his head. No. But someone close to you did. Someone who saw him as a project, not a life. Karina said nothing. Her hands clenched into fists. This archive has restricted files, she admitted after a long pause. My father ordered them sealed. Only I have access now. I've never opened them. Without waiting for permission, she placed her hand on the control panel and authorized access. A series of old documents flickered into view, project names like Nightfang, Mindspike, and finally, DROZHAK1. Ethan stood and leaned in, reading the logs with growing discomfort. The records told of behavioral overrides, pain response trials, and mental resets done again and again to test obedience. There were mentions of failure of rebellion, and a final entry marked subject terminated, archive incomplete. But Drozhak had survived. He was never terminated. He had escaped, and someone had covered it up. Karina looked pale now, her eyes fixed on a photo of her father standing proudly beside a younger, smaller Drozhak bound in energy chains. He lied to me, she whispered. He said Drozhak was an accident. He said it was abandoned research from our enemies. But he was the one behind it all. Ethan placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Maybe he was afraid. Maybe he thought he was doing what needed to be done to win a war. But he created something that couldn't be controlled and then tried to erase the truth. Drozhak let out a low sound, not a growl, but something deeper. It echoed through the chamber like an old memory waking up. The creature stepped forward, pushing its head gently against Karina's side, not in anger, but in understanding. Her eyes widened as she placed her hand on his massive brow. You remember this place? She said. Drozhak nodded slowly, eyes closing. It was the first time he had acknowledged her touch without pulling away. A fragile thread of something new began to form between them. Trust, perhaps. Forgiveness, maybe. Ethan watched it happen and knew that something deeper was unfolding, not just a connection between species, but the uncovering of truths long buried under scars, both visible and hidden. But even as the moment passed quietly between the three of them, Ethan's mind raced with unease. Because hidden in the lower sections of the file was one more entry marked 2. A second subject. No records. No name. No location. Just a single status, active. Somewhere out there, another like Drozhak existed. Maybe worse. Maybe smarter. Maybe still loyal to its creators. Ethan said nothing for now. He didn't want to break the moment Karina and Drozhak were sharing. But deep in his gut, he felt the shift coming. This wasn't just about healing an old wound anymore. It was about stopping the next one from opening. The discovery of the hidden file marked 2 haunted Ethan's thoughts for days. A silent alarm ringing in the back of his mind, no matter how calm the academy seemed on the surface. Even while Drozhak lay peacefully beside him in the training yards or followed his steps like a loyal companion, the idea of a second predator, one that had never been recorded, never seen, never stopped weighed heavily on him. He didn't tell Karina everything, not yet. She was already shaken by the truth of her father's experiments and the lies that had shaped her life. But he kept digging, spending long nights in the restricted archives under the academy, tracing faint trails of data, ghost records that had almost been wiped clean. Slowly, a pattern emerged: unexplained disappearances of scouts in deep space, shredded remains found drifting near mining stations, black box recordings of screaming pilots before their transmissions cut off. All of them marked as pirate attacks, but Ethan noticed something else: the wounds on. The ships weren't from weapons. They were from claws, massive ones, and the energy traces didn't match known engines. It was the same kind of pattern found years ago when Drazhak had escaped. The second creature was active, all right, but it was smarter than the first. It hunted with planning, and it had a purpose. That purpose became terrifyingly clear when a message arrived at Velmara Prime, a distress call from a diplomatic vessel carrying a peace envoy. The ship had been attacked just outside the neutral zone, and only one passenger escaped in a pod, one of Karina's closest advisors. His voice was weak and strained in the message, and one line stood out. It wasn't pirates. It was like Drazhak, but wrong. And it said, "It's coming for her." Ethan showed the message to Karina in private, watching as her face went pale and her posture stiffened. "It's not after random targets," he said. "It's after you." For a long moment, Karina said nothing. Then, in a voice colder than he'd ever heard, she answered, "Then let it come. I want to see what my father truly created." Ethan wasn't so eager. He knew Drazhak was powerful, but he also knew that if this other beast had the same design, it could be just as strong, and if it had no one to guide it, no one to calm it the way Ethan did for Drazhak, it could be far worse. The Academy went on high alert. Defense systems were activated. Patrols were doubled. Karina remained calm in public, showing no fear. But behind closed doors, she prepared her personal guards, and for the first time in her life, she carried a plasma blade strapped to her back. Drazhak became restless, pacing halls he never cared about before, growling low at shadows that passed too close. It was as if he sensed something coming. And then it arrived. In the middle of a storm-filled night, alarms shrieked through the academy. Something had crashed in the lower districts past the main shields, deep in the underground industrial sector where old ships were decommissioned. Ethan and Drazhak were among the first to reach the crash site, moving through smoke and fire. The wreckage was unfamiliar black metal twisted in strange angles, humming with a low vibration like a living thing. And from the shadows around it, corpses. Not guards. Not soldiers. Maintenance crews ripped apart with surgical precision. No signs of a ship's pilot. Just a trail leading into the underground tunnels. Ethan didn't wait for backup. He followed the trail, his heartbeat loud in his ears, Drazhak stalking silently beside him. They moved through the broken corridors, deeper into the station's underbelly, where lights flickered and the walls echoed with distant scraping sounds. Then, from the dark ahead, it stepped out. It was like Drazhak, same size, same claws, same glowing eyes, but sleeker, more armored, and its gaze held no recognition, no warmth. It didn't growl. It didn't roar. It just stared, studying Ethan for a long moment. And then it spoke, not in words, but through a pulsing psychic wave that echoed in Ethan's mind. "You're the weakness." The voice was cold, sharp, full of contempt. Drazhak roared, stepping between Ethan and the creature, muscles tensed, ready to fight. But the other beast tilted its head slowly. "You were made to lead, not follow," it said to Drazhak. "You were the first. I was the final. I complete what you abandoned." And without warning, it attacked. The clash shook the tunnel, metal walls buckling under the force of their blows. Drazhak fought with fury, claws tearing, teeth snapping, but the other was faster, more precise. Ethan dodged flying debris, watching in horror as Drazhak was thrown into a wall. Blood splattered the floor. The other beast turned to Ethan, stepping toward him slowly. "You broke him," it said. "You infected him with weakness." Ethan stood his ground, his hand reaching for the emergency beacon on his belt, but the creature swatted it away before he could press it. It raised its claws. But just before it struck, something unexpected happened. Drazhak moved again, leaping with a cry that echoed like thunder, not just rage, but something deeper: protection, choice. He slammed into the other creature, driving it back, roaring so loudly it shook dust from the ceiling. The two beasts fought again, but this time Ethan saw something shift. Drazhak wasn't just matching his opponent, he was adapting. He was learning. The bond between him and Ethan wasn't weakness, it was strength. And the other creature didn't understand it. It had no bond. It fought alone. And alone, it was just a weapon. Kairina and the guard teams arrived minutes later, weapons ready, but by the time they reached the tunnel, the other creature had fled, wounded and furious, vanishing into the depths of the planet's underground systems. Drazhak stood bloodied but proud, and when Kairina approached, he didn't growl or back away. He let her touch his side and whispered a low sound like a sigh. That night, in the command chamber, as Ethan told the council what had happened, the fear in their eyes was clear. The Predator hadn't come for war. It had come for one target, Kairina. And it would come again. But now, they weren't facing it alone. They had Ethan. They had Drazhak. And they had something the enemy didn't: a reason to fight, not for control, but for each other. Felt colder, the shadows longer, as if the second Predator had left behind more than just fear, it had left a warning. Drazhak healed slowly, deep wounds stitched together with advanced biogel, but Ethan noticed something different in his eyes. He had changed. Not just physically, but inside. The gentle calm that Ethan once saw was now mixed with a storm, not rage, but readiness, like Drazhak knew the final fight was coming. Kairina took control of the situation, calling for emergency meetings with planetary defense leaders, ordering sweeps of the lower sectors, deploying sensor drones far beyond their normal range. She was no longer just a noble or a scholar, she became a leader forged by fire, shaped by betrayal, and now driven by purpose. But the more they searched, the less they found. The second creature, Subject 2, had disappeared without a trace. Ethan knew better than to relax. That thing hadn't run. It was planning. And the next time it struck, it wouldn't be in the shadows. It would want a stage. It would want everyone to see. Late one night, while reviewing surveillance data, Ethan found a pattern in the creature's movement. Every place it attacked had one thing in common: they were locations tied to Drazhak's past. Old labs, hidden research stations, old XLR outposts that no one even remembered. It was like the creature was wiping away the evidence of its origin, burning the story behind its creation, leaving only destruction behind. But the last location on the list wasn't a lab. It was Velmara's Sky Council, a towering spire that stood over the city like a crown, filled with ambassadors, scholars, and leaders. It wasn't a symbol of war. It was a symbol of peace. And suddenly, it all made sense. The second Predator didn't want to kill Kairina out of revenge. It wanted to erase the legacy of Drazhak's bond, the proof that a weapon could choose compassion, that a monster could grow a soul. It wanted to destroy the idea that strength could come from love, and it would strike at the heart of that idea at Kairina, Ethan, and everyone who believed in what Drazhak had become. When the alarms rang out again, no one panicked this time. Everyone knew what it meant. The enemy had arrived, and this time it was not hiding. It tore through the outer towers with brutal speed, climbing the spire like a predator scaling a tree, ignoring plasma blasts and defense drones. Ethan and Drazhak met it halfway up, leaping from a skimmer into the open-air platform where the stars burned above them and the city glowed below. The wind howled around them as they faced the creature, its dark form glistening with blood and fury. It looked at Drazhak first. "You were made to lead armies. You kneel to a human. You disgrace your own strength." Drazhak stepped forward, his chest rising slowly, and let out a deep sound, not a roar, but something more ancient, like a heartbeat echoed through mountains. He didn't respond with words. He didn't need to. His presence beside Ethan was the answer. The second creature turned its gaze to Ethan next. "You broke the chain," it hissed. "You gave the weapon a choice. That was your mistake." Ethan clenched his fists. "Maybe, but he's not a weapon anymore." The creature charged, and the final battle began. It was chaos, speed, violence wrapped in silence. The two beasts collided in midair, claws flashing, teeth snapping, throwing each other across the platform. Ethan barely dodged a swipe meant to tear him in half, rolling to the edge, his hand clutching a fallen plasma spear. Karina arrived moments later with backup, but she didn't fire. She knew this battle was more than just muscle and weapons. It was about who Drazhak truly was. And as the fight raged on, she saw it. Drazhak wasn't trying to win with strength alone. He was protecting. Every move he made was to keep Ethan safe, to push the creature away from the control panels, the support beams, the edge where civilians might fall. And slowly, that became the difference. The second predator fought to destroy. Drazhak fought to protect. And that purpose made him stronger. With a final roar, Drazhak locked his jaws around the enemy's neck and drove it backward, slamming it into a core beam. The creature lashed out wildly, cutting deep wounds across Drazhak's side, but the Guardian didn't stop. With a surge of power, he lifted the creature and threw it over the edge of the platform. For a second, it hung in the air, clawing at nothing. Then it fell, disappearing into the clouds below, its scream fading with the wind. Silence returned. Drazhak collapsed to one knee, breathing hard, blood dripping onto the steel. Ethan rushed to his side, gripping his arm. "You did it," he whispered. Karina knelt beside them, placing her hand gently on Drazhak's back. For the first time in her life, her voice trembled. "No, we did it." In the days that followed, things began to change. The Academy released the truth about Drazhak and the failed experiments. Protests rose across the system, demanding that the XLRE purge the last remains of such research. Karina stood before the council and declared that no creature, no matter how dangerous, should be born without the right to choose its path. Ethan received commendations, medals, offers from high command, but he stayed at the Academy. His bond with Drazhak wasn't over. It was just beginning. Together, they helped train new recruits, taught them that strength wasn't about power alone, but about purpose. That even a weapon could choose peace. That even a monster could protect. And somewhere deep in the Academy gardens, under a sky filled with stars, a human and his alien friend sat in silence, no words needed. Just the sound of breathing, the soft rhythm of life continuing, fearless hearts beating side by side. The scars remained, but they no longer hurt. They were stories now. Stories of final choices. Stories of love and loyalty, and the day when a creature meant to terrify the galaxy became its greatest protector.